Porsche has never been bigger business, and I guess that makes sense. When the future looks a bit weird and potentially a bit warm, the appeal of looking backwards rather than forwards is obvious.
But the 60s were, without doubt, a pretty great time to be alive. Youth culture exploded, the drugs and the music were, I'm told, first rate, and technology was progressing almost exponentially. In F1, the innovative Lotus 49 was absolutely doing a Red Bull, and just 20 years after the first commercial jet flight, we put a man on the moon. And in 1963, a couple of pretty cool things happened on both sides of the Atlantic. In Germany, Porsche invented the 911. And in New York, an artist created the Smiley, the little round happy yellow face. One would go on to become arguably the world's greatest sports car, transcending the automotive landscape to establish itself as a symbol of success and an icon of performance and design. The other, well, that little yellow circle started out as a radio station promo, and by Mick Jagger, the rave scene and Nirvana ended up as an emoji. It's fitting that they were created in the same year. The 911's been putting smiles on people's faces since the very beginning. But 60 years on, is the brand new 2023 ST still a happy car?
Or, with 60 years of progress and cars getting bigger, heavier, grippier and more powerful, has something gone missing? Has the 911 somehow lost touch with what made the original so special? Have they turned it from a smiley into something a bit more serious, a bit scary even? The iconic Porsche 911 celebrates its 60th anniversary this year, and that was all the excuse we needed to bring together these two spectacular cars. So we've got an original 901, one of the first 911s ever built, and the brand new 2023 ST. And our task today is to answer one super important question. If the 901 is clearly a smiley emoji, what emoji is the ferocious new ST? At the 63 Frankfurt Motor Show, Porsche unveiled a car that got the world and Peugeot's lawyers pretty excited. That car, the 901, evolved the very first Porsche, the 356, into something bigger, more practical and more sophisticated. Peugeot's lawyers would force a name change to 911, and the rest, well, the rest is history and the story of the world's greatest sports car. It's totally fitting that the Smiley and the 901 came into being at the same time, because when you drive this monumentally important Porsche, you just cannot help but smile. So behind the wheel of the 901 at last, and what a car. I mean, origin story as far as the 911 is concerned. And as you can see, I'm smiling already. I mean, to be fair, that starts before you even drive the thing. It's just such a small, such a pretty and perfectly formed car. And that was a deliberate result of Ferdinand Porsche's philosophy that while they were going to take the 356 and add another pair of seats, more power, a little bit more refinement, he was adamant they didn't want to lose any of the ethos of the first Porsche. Had to stay small, had to stay relatively lightweight. And he was sketching this car through the late 50s into the early 60s. And the result, the 901, first shown in 1963, well, to summarise, it's even prettier than the 356.
Porsche's Type 754 of the late 50s hinted at the future. 4 seats and a flattened bonnet between prominent front wings. Through 62, the 754 turned into the 901, although the car shown in 63 was a long way short of finished. The definitive spec didn't emerge until late 64, when the car we're driving was built.
What's it like to drive? Oh man. Well, basically, you know the idea of don't meet your heroes. Some things are best not revisited. Well, I can resolutely say that this car is not one of those things. Oh my God, it is just so much fun. I mean, the recipe couldn't be simpler, although you can't forget that it was really advanced for the time. So 130 horsepower from that just under 2 litre engine, single overhead camshaft, 2 valves per cylinder, but we've got a 5-speed gearbox, we've got disc brakes all round, we've got a monocoque construction. I mean, a lot of that stuff is what made the Peugeot 1.9205 GTI special. And that was, what, 20, 25 years later, admittedly in a lighter and less expensive package.
There really is a beautiful balance to this car, and the way it clings on, even under duress, is really impressive, feeling perfectly balanced across the two axles.
Okay, the brakes aren't amazing, but the gearbox is really user-friendly. The engine just feels so sort of long-legged. It's got that, no wonder 911's kind of quickly established this dual remit of sports cars, but also kind of GTs, because while the tighter stuff might be quite hard work, the open flowing stuff like this, I mean, the visibility is fantastic, the composure is there, the power is there. It just feels like there's nothing to stop you. You could just keep driving and driving and driving and enjoying this incredible car for as long as you want.
And honestly, the limiting factor isn't so much the car, but the ergonomics, the fact that the seat is flat and the wood-rimmed wheel gives you no grip. You just can't hang on. Slip in a pair of bucket seats and fit a leather-rimmed steering wheel of a smaller diameter and you'd be away, just flying between the railings enjoying yourself. And the fact the 901 gives you so much driving confidence is just as well given the value of the thing. Well over €1,000,000 if you decided you just have to have one.
I mean, by definition, all 901s are special, but this car, chassis number 300057, is particularly special. It was built in the autumn of 1964, so just around about the time the name changed from 901 to 911. But this car was then lost for years, lost for decades, and fell into a pretty grim state of repair until Porsche themselves bought it from a barn find. They paid €100,000 for the car, and then what followed was the Carlsberg of restoration. So they poured 12 months into the body, making that right, and then another 120 hours into the engine, but keeping what they could. So one of the camshafts is original, as are the cylinder heads, making perfect a car born in '64 and now in 2023 an absolute asset for Porsche, and more importantly, plastering a great big smile over my face.
If the 901 is a car to make you smile, a four-wheeled Smiley with a flat-six engine, then the same must be true of the 911 ST, right? After all, 911s never really change. Right from the beginning, even when Porsche's clients demanded more than the 356 could give, they made it very clear they didn't want revolution, just intelligent evolution. And ever since, each new 911 has been as much about what stayed the same as what changed. Surely these two will just feel like twins born 60 years apart.
If, like me, you've spent way too much of your life on it, you'll be all too aware that Porsche has an online configurator. But where the likes of you and I are wondering about which wheels to have or whether to colour match our seatbelts to our paint, imagine Porsche GT boss Andy Preuninger sitting there with a super configurator, available to him every single trick in the 911 parts bin, from flat-six engines through different gearboxes to different powertrains.
Twin clutch gearboxes, turbocharging, performance four-wheel drive, the battery electric Taycan. Porsche is hardly backwards about forging forwards with technology. Yet on the ST you'll find none of that, quite deliberately. In the broadest possible terms, it shares a great deal with the 901. A rear-mounted, flat-six engine, manual gearbox, disc brakes all round, and that timeless silhouette.
The ST is kind of based on the GT3 Touring, but it comes in lighter. This is actually the lightest 911 992 we've had yet, 1380 kilograms, or 38 kilograms lighter than the lightest GT3 Touring. Now, some of that comes from the narrower body, so we don't have the wide body that they use on the Turbo and the GT3 RS. And we've also, while it looks a bit like a GT3 Touring, got bespoke carbon fibre panels almost all over the car, including that double bubble roof. And then there's some touches you can't see, like the lightweight clutch that saves over 10 kilograms alone, and then the deletion for the first time on a car with double wishbone front suspension of the rear wheel steering system. So not only do you junk the system itself, but that let Porsche use a lighter battery to save further weight.
Porsche has, of course, learned one or two things in the 60 years between the 901 and the ST. It's learned, for example, that when you're pushing hard for more power, on road and on track, with a naturally aspirated flat-six versus turbocharged opposition, you need two things. You need capacity and you need revs.
When it came to Mr. Preuninger and his super configurator, there was really only one option on engine. the 4-litre unit from the GT3 RS. So more than twice the size of the engine in the 901 and something like twice the specific output as well. So 130 horsepower per litre here versus 65 for the 1963 car. And there's a whole host of tech that goes into that, of course. So we've got 4-valve heads, double overhead camshafts, and massively over square bore and stroke dimensions. And all of that adds up to two things. It adds up to revs and it adds up to power. So 518 horsepower here at 8,500 RPM and that 9,000 RPM red line. There really is nothing quite like it. And sadly, it might not be around for too much longer.
Porsche also learned really quite late that ultimately double wishbone suspension is superior to its beloved front struts. We got double wishbone suspension first on the 992 911 GT3 and the ST gets those too.
So obviously a little bit more rubber on the floor with the ST, tiny little 15-inch wheels with narrow rubber on the 901, and here we've got offset wheel sizes, 20-inch front, 21-inch rear, and they're bespoke magnesium forged wheels on this car with the centre lock wheel nuts, and of course lightweight ceramic brakes as standard on the ST.
This ST features the £14,000 Heritage Pack on top of your £232,000 before options car. And it includes at least 24 karat gold badges, which look pretty awesome on a car in this colour.
So how does the ST feel? Well, spoiler alert, it's pretty special, which, given the parts bin we've been talking about, probably doesn't come as much of a surprise. The weird thing about it is that there is something of a road focus to it, which I know isn't always obvious when you're talking about aero-shaped double wishbone suspension and 9,000 RPM flat sixes, but there's two suspension settings. You've got normal and sport. Sometimes you find yourself reaching for a comfort mode that doesn't exist, but apparently a year's work went into tuning the damping. So although we've got the same basic springs and dampers as a GT3 Touring, there is a year's specific work on the calibration of the adaptive suspension. And it has paid dividends. There is real pliancy at low speed. It will handle manhole covers and kind of scarred urban roads. And then when you get it out here on the smooth stuff, oh my God, it's just sensational.
But we should talk about the way this car goes round corners. The steering rack is a little bit slower than a GT3, just because you've lost that rear wheel steering system, which can calm the car down at higher speeds. So the steering's a tiny bit slower, but it is so sweetly judged. There's so much feel through it, so much feel through the front wheels that you can almost feel the different textures of paint running under the tyres.
You're sort of rummaging around trying to find links between 2023, between this car and the 1963 901. And you sort of think, am I kidding myself? But they are definitely there. I mean, obviously, lots of the sort of edges on the 911 have been chipped off, making it a more rounded, more forgiving car over the years. And I guess with this car, the double wishbone front suspension removes that sort of slightly light sensation you sometimes had from the front axle. But there is commonality there, definitely. When you look behind you, the angle of that rear screen is exactly the same in this car as it is in 901. The view is the same, you know, that gently curving bonnet between wings that are okay, a load wider apart in this car than they are in the tiny little 901. But there are similarities, and it's there in the engine as well. Obviously, this thing is a known quantity and sounds utterly sensational. And at lower revs, you don't really think, oh yeah, this is a 911, the 901. You're just thinking, this is a 60s engine, but get it above 4.5, 5,000 RPM. And you do hear a bit of this in that car. But yeah, you think, oh, I'm shifting. And then you jump into this thing and yeah, it just feels like somehow you've been given superpowers. The way it changes direction, the body control, the way it stays so flat. It's just so addictive.
Excuse me if I get a bit philosophical for a moment, but comparing the 901 and the ST is a bit of a reminder of the evolution of the operating window in which sports cars work. The 901 is really happy around town, and it's lovely in the faster flowing corners, but when things get tight and tricky, the brakes ultimately can't really cope, and the car becomes a little bit like hard work.
Now, to an extent, the ST does not do that. The ST is kind of comfortable in town, and you can kid yourself. You know, you can cruise along thinking, I'm pretty comfortable. I'm pretty happy with this snappy gear shift and this unforgiving at times lightweight clutch. But then you get the car out into its element like this, and it just, where the 901 falls away and starts to run into shortcomings, the ST just flexes its muscles and gets on with becoming better and better and better. And yeah, extreme though its performance it is, and it is pretty extreme. 518 horsepower may not be anything to write home about in this era of turbocharged, well, I was going to say turbocharged near 1,000 horsepower supercars, but of course we've got electric 2,000 horsepower supercars. 518 horsepower is nothing in that, but it does all come together in a really manageable, confidence-inspiring package. It is not anything like as intimidating as it should be. There's quite a lot of pressure, isn't it, being Porsche's 60th anniversary 911. You think about all the cars that have come before, that wonderful 901, the first turbo, the 911R more recently, the GT3s, the GT3 RSs. There's some stiff competition out there and some pretty serious cars to try and, well, at least be on a par with. But I think the ST manages it. And its timing is absolutely impeccable. The hybrid era of the 992.2 is almost upon us. The next 60 years will almost certainly see more disruption and more change than the last 60 years. And yet here we are in a car that shares fundamentally so much with that 901, not just in its broad mechanical specification, but in the way it drives and the way it makes you feel.
But back to that question, the existential question of the day. If the 901 is a smiley, which emoji is the ST?
Well, it is definitely still a smiley. It might do it in a slightly different way, but this car will make you happier. There's probably a couple more in the mix as well. There's the heart eyes for the way it looks and the way it sounds. Has it got a little bit of poo sometimes when you bite off more than you can chew? And then most importantly of all, there's the blown mind emoji. I think if you had to pick one, that is it.